corrections to the minutes of October 13th? Hearing none, I will ask for unanimous consent to approve the minutes of October 13th as well.
So moved.
We have one gentleman here. Sir, would you like to speak to anything not on the agenda tonight? We'll move past public comment. We'll skip the consent agenda, which is empty. We have no presentation and discussion items, nor any public hearing, so we will move right to item 9.1. We are reviewing and commenting on landscape plan proposed revisions for the Yountville Inn. Sandra.
Yes, this is an amendment to the master development plan for the Yountville Inn. It consists of changes to the approved colors and the approved landscape plan. And the improvements fall into several categories. One is the landscaping, and landscape architect has indicated he selected plants that connect more with the Napa Valley theme and the wine theme of the county. There are several native plants listed on the plan, and the species are identified in the plant index in the drawing set. One of the main elements of the landscape plan is the preservation and retention of the heritage oaks on the site, and this plan differs from the one before in that there are active and passive recreation areas planned for beneath these trees. Two of the designated oaks are listed as trees 5 and 6 on the plan, and where these were showing mechanical units placed within their canopies, they're now showing elevated decks that wrap around the trunk and provide an area for breakfast, dining, and gathering. They feature stairs that descend to lawn areas that are located to the north and south of both sides of the deck. And the applicant submitted a letter from Mark Hyatt of Cutright Tree Service stating that the design of the decks will have a minimum impact on the health and survival of the trees. We'd also asked for him to comment on the lawns that fall within the canopy, but we didn't receive comment on that. Two of the other oaks feature benches and fountains, and one has a bocce ball court that's beneath the canopy. And Mark Hyatt submitted the letter at each of your seats that was submitted after we went to publication of the staff report, but it indicates that 4-foot tree wells should be provided beneath these canopies with aeration for the roots. He also indicated, though, that the soil compaction that's required for bocce ball courts would be detrimental to the trees, and he advises that be removed. There are new street trees proposed, and these are Chinese pistache. There would be 13 along Washington Street and 6 along Champaign Drive. They're spaced at approximately 25 feet on center. And the plan also is proposing 4 multi-trunk specimen olive trees at the driveway onto Champaign, and they'd be 2 to either side of the driveway. There are modifications proposed for the parking lot, which softens its appearance and which incorporates more tree wells. And there were some slight reconfigurations to that lot at the northwest corner to accommodate the stalls that were displaced. But there have been no parking stalls that have been eliminated. And the driveway surface now consists of a combination of DG colored concrete and permeable pavers, and these will be the same materials used on paths throughout the site and on the Hopper Creek pathway. There is wall fencing for the creekside units that face Hopper Creek to provide privacy between those units, and these would be 6-foot tall walls that are perpendicular to the buildings, and they would be a lattice work material set in colors that would allow their removal in a high water event, and that's important because the walls are within the Hopper Creek setback of 35 feet from center line of creek. The creekside landscaping that is proposed retains and preserves 12 oaks of varying size, and it proposes a creek revegetation scheme that uses native trees, shrubs, and ground cover, and these include valley oaks and coast live oaks, as well as some other native species. There has been a modification to the stone walls that were earlier approved, and these were at angles to Washington Street, and the applicant now proposes aligning these with the walls that are on the north end of the existing site. and these would be, would continue for the entire street frontage of Washington and curve around the corner onto Champaign. They would feature 8-foot tall walls with a 3-foot berm that's on the street side, so that it appears 5 feet from the street, but creates an 8-foot wall on the inside. And these are set back, the required distance for the front yard setback of 17 feet for the Washington Street side, 10 feet from back of curb on Champaign, and they're not within the 35-foot vision triangle at the intersection. The applicant proposes resizing and reconfiguration of the pool and the whirlpool to better fit the space, and new building colors that are more subtle in earth tone to enhance the Napa stone that is incorporated into the building. And these proposed improvements generally comply with the town's zoning and design ordinance for landscaping and surfaces. Staff just has 3 concerns. One is with the improvements proposed beneath the oak trees, and it's the lawn that we haven't received confirmation won't be detrimental to the oak tree canopies, and the other is the bocce golf course. So we would suggest that those be removed from within the canopy, or the drip line. The creekside walls are another issue of concern because these are within the creekside setback, but the council can approve improvements in that setback where they've been designed so that they don't increase the danger of flooding, and the applicant is proposing breakaway walls that could be removed in the event of a flood. And staff's main concern is that there is a policy implemented to so that employees would know what to do in an event and that it wouldn't pass. That there could be an alternative to raise the lower level of the fence by 6 inches to a foot, and to underplant it with plants to allow floodwaters to pass through without adding that maintenance requirement. The last issue of concern are the stone walls that would create somewhat of a compound and walled-in effect because these are proposed at 8 feet. And while they would be 5 foot visible from the street side, staff has concerns that they will seem larger and more massive. They're similar to the stone walls that are on the existing Washington Inn or Yountville Inn project. However, those walls are set on an actual berm. They feature 2 different elevations. The lower one's about 4 feet, the taller one's 6 feet, and they're used in selected areas, whereas these will continue for a substantial amount of project frontage. And the town's policy has been to encourage more open landscapes and less of a walled-in compound effect. So we would suggest that these be decreased in height to minimize that. The applicant's here to answer questions and to give their presentation, and I'll turn it over to them.
Thank you, Sandra. Any questions of staff on the staff report?
No.
Madam? Sandra, I do have 2. Do you know, is this the same project arborist who, I presume there was an arborist at the start of the project for the initial design when it went through the process?
Yes.
So it's been a continuous chain. This is the same fellow?
Yes.
Excellent. And my second question, to make sure I understand correctly, the proposed stone wall on the front elevation, it would appear to be 5 feet from the street side due to the buildup, and on the project side, the interior side, it would appear to be 8 feet. Is that correct?
Yes.
Those are my only questions. Would the applicant like to speak to us?
My name is David Shapiro, and just to give you a little context on why we're here, Lisa Holt and myself have a company called DLS Hotels. What that really means is it's our company, and our background is hotel development and boutique hotel development, specifically. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Specifically, Milliken Creek Inn and Spa. I don't know if any of you know that, but we had a tremendous amount of success with that property. We sold it back in 2005, but we are very, very sensitive to landscaping issues and to flooding issues and to drainage issues. I mean, we had like the most difficult property there is probably in the valley to deal with those kind of issues. So we're intimately involved, and when we were brought in on the project, our marching orders are, I want to make this property the best property we can make it. And the Altamirans understand that we have a lot of experience with that, especially with boutique kind of properties, and what we want to do is create an intimate property that has a resort experience, yet is tangible and very human in terms of its scale. And so one of the reasons that we're here is we sat down and said, well, we need to redo this because we didn't want to go ahead with what was being done in the past. We really, for us to be involved, we wanted to make this a special project. So everything we're doing is to make it a better project for our guests, a better project for the city, a better project for the community, everything. And so I just wanted to give you a little context of why we're all here and what our position is. Lisa and the architects can speak to the specifics. My main thing is operations and what happens once we're open and how all that works. And so I just wanted to put my 2 cents in. Anything that I missed? No? Good? Okay, great. Thanks.
I'm Lisa Holt, and I'm the other half of DLS. And as Sandro's already very thoroughly reviewed with you all, there are a number of specific details that we're asking to kind of upgrade with this revision to the landscaping. And it has a great deal to do with the fact that what we're trying to do with the property is change it from the experience of what you have now with Yountville Inn, which is a good property, and bring it up to a 4+ star property, which would involve a resort experience for the guests. And to do that, we need to include more of the exterior landscaping and experience for the guests. If you go into Yountville Inn now, there's not a lot of space where a guest can roam around and have a seat under a nice tree and just kind of relax and enjoy kind of the wine country experience. And so we have the opportunity with these revisions that we're proposing tonight to include more of that experience for the guest. And what that does is that does help us bring up the quality and the caliber of the hotel. As Sandra already mentioned, we're kind of hitting on some basics. We're revising the overall color scheme of all of the materials. Previously presented and approved for the parking lot was asphalt. And we feel that we can do a better job of creating a better surface for that, a surface finish for that kind of upgrades that experience and makes that look better. All the architectural colors are revising to a more earth-toned color scheme. The planting is taking on a much more Napa Valley feel. We're even replicating the pistachio trees that are part of the town's language of landscaping as well, which we're really excited to include as well. And so by doing so and including the areas that are surrounding the pool and the areas that are underneath the trees, we're creating more usable spaces for the guests. And we're also changing up the quality of the hardscaping so that the sidewalks that they're walking on are pavers as opposed to just basic concrete and things. So we're really kind of taking those 3 things up. Parker Smith, who is our landscape architect, will address the 3 specific concerns that staff has mentioned to us specifically, but I'm just kind of giving you an overview of why we're here and sort of what the overall goal, hopefully, you can help us achieve by doing this. So.
Hi, my name is James Jeffrey. I'm the architect for the Yountville Inn. Although none of these changes that are proposed tonight are directly related to the structures themselves, the buildings, I believe all the changes proposed tonight will enhance the architecture and the overall experience of the guests. So I think operating partners David and Lisa Shapiro have done a fantastic job of turning the inn into a first-class resort, and I just want to say so far everything they've done has been to improve and enhance the quality of the project. And I think they're doing a great job.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Parker Smith, the landscape architect. And this has been an interesting experience in revamping this landscape plan and basically upgrading it to a great extent over the approval that was given by this committee to us in 2007, I believe. It's always nice to have someone come in and say, you know, do an even better job with more plants and larger plants and give us a nice, you know, quality landscape product here. So that's what we're trying to do. There's really 4 zones of landscaping here, and I thought I'd start by addressing those. There's the streetscape that the public sees, really, along the 2 major streets that are on the 2 sides of this project. And then there's the space that Lisa and David have been talking about the guest activity areas, the seating areas, the pool area, all the areas that make the project a resort. And then there's the central parking area, which we've converted from rather plain asphalt with 8 finger islands for trees to a combination of stamped asphalt and concrete and eco pavers to provide additional air and water to the tree roots. We've created more of a courtyard effect to that central parking area that goes right down the middle of the project. And then there's the creek, which in the previous plan was minimized, and in this one we've done quite a bit of additional native plantings in the creek to make it a more enjoyable experience, as well as to screen it back and forth from the adjoining mobile home park to the northwest side. So those are the 4 zones, and I'll try to be real quick on the specifics that we've done in those zones. First, going back to the street frontage area, the walls are, as you mentioned, as Sandra mentioned, are a concern along there, and in that respect, after seeing the staff report, we did a sketch of what those walls would look like in elevation, if I may pass that around to you, and also took photographs. Yes, if you would.
Please.
And we've also provided a photograph of the existing walls, because basically what we're doing is replicating the existing wall. The walls will not be a consistent 8-foot height. We will, as we mentioned in the section, we said the 8-foot was the maximum height, and that's 8 foot on the inside. And this little elevation is a partial elevation of about half of the street frontage, and it shows that these walls vary from 6 to 7 to 8 foot, and they go up and down as you go along there. So it won't be a consistent, level height along there. The mound will stay fairly level at 3 foot, so you'll never have more than a 5-foot wall exposed as you go along Washington Street. And that'll reduce to 4 and 3 feet with the, total height of the wall. And it will look very much like that photograph, almost identical. The only difference will be we won't have as much lawn, because we have to have a bioswale out there to absorb some of the runoff from the pool area, and so it'll be a grass still, but it'll be a natural clumping grass. It's a hard and red fescue mix that I usually use, and we'll put it in as a sod, so it'll be clean, good looking right from the beginning. But it will be allowed to grow in its natural state. Maybe mowed a couple times in the summer, to look more like a lawn, but mainly it's supposed to, have a height of about a foot in the winter to do its filtering job. So and then above that, on the slope up the mound towards the base of the wall, will be more ground cover and shrubs than is presently in the existing wall. It's just lawn going up to it. So there'll be a lot more softening of the wall, is what I'm getting at. And additionally, there's about 8 new oak trees that go along the outside of that wall also. So it'll be a lot more softened than the existing one is, and but yet relate very strongly to it. Now, once you get within the wall, we need that 8-foot height for sound attenuation. We have, a fair amount of sound coming from the highway on this site, and to make that pool area and those decks usable and pleasant to sit on and so on. We need to be able to reduce that highway sound, and we need the 8 feet or 7 to 8 feet to do that. And that's our objective, one of the objectives with getting the walls to that height. And then we proposed the decks this time. The previous plan only had mulch under the oak trees, and it had a very jagged, irregular wall shape to it. Granted, it did step further back from the street, but it wasn't very attractive from the inside. This will be create a much more attractive space on the inside, and we think look just as well from the outside. The deck, as mentioned by the arborist, shouldn't cause any problems with the existing oak tree roots. The objective was to put a deck there so that we could maintain natural rainfall and air to the natural grade under the oak trees. Now, yes, we have infringed on the drip line somewhat with the lawn areas, but I've done that on other projects where we had valley oaks with success, and based on a study I saw several years ago that was done by UC Davis, they had studied a lot of the parks and other projects around the state to see whether some additional water from irrigating lawns was a detriment or a positive to valley oaks. And their conclusion was that if the lawns were kept on the outer edges of the drip line, was that it was actually a positive thing for the valley oaks, that they liked a little water year-round on the outside edge of their outer edges of their root system. So I've gone on that philosophy for several years and been quite successful. Had no problems with putting some irrigation, out on that outer edge of the valley oaks. And then I see existing college campuses like Santa Rosa JC that has lawn coming even well into almost up to the trunks of the oak trees, and they've been there for many, many years and don't seem to be detrimentally affected by it. Now, there are other factors in, the quality of the drainage and the quality of the type of soil and so on, but I feel quite confident that some lawn coming in under that drip line will not be a problem. So we'd really like to keep it the way we have it. If you feel that's a danger, we can increase the decks somewhat in size perhaps and reduce that amount of lawn. But ideally, we'd like to have it the way it is. We think it's a good balance of pool deck and wood deck and lawn areas within that interior area. We also have created quite a few passive sitting areas under the 2 oak trees on the more northwest side of the property. Have sitting areas and fountains, so that we've used a lot of fountains in the project, again, to compete with the road noise and just to create, a positive sound within that usable areas. There's 2 or 3 of them within the pool area, or 4 or 5 actually, within the pool area, and a couple of others along the passive areas I just mentioned. And then when we get to the parking area, as mentioned, we've gone from just plain asphalt and 8 islands for trees to 20 islands for trees, and a more textured and colored asphalt, as well as concrete for the parking areas themselves, for the parking spots themselves. And these eco-pavers outline each of these islands so that we get more air and water penetration, because the islands are fairly narrow. They're down to about 30 inches to 3 feet. So I felt we needed more area for the roots to get some air and water. So we used a double row of pavers to outline all the parking spaces. And then when we move to the creek area on the north side there, we've done a plan that has met with the Fish and Game's approval with all natives, with the adding about 8 or 10 native oak trees, as mentioned, and several understory plants that will provide that screening between the 2 projects. We've maintained the natural grasses down the center of that creek area and planted the upper part of the slopes, so we didn't want to disturb the actual flow area. That's the basic concept. We have an orchard-like feeling, as mentioned by Lisa, within the parking area, and we've used the pistache trees there as well as as street trees, so that we can have some continuity to all the tree forms. We have some Italian cypress in there around the pool area where we don't want much shade, but we want some height and attractiveness. And without going into every plant material, I'll quit right there unless you have any questions.
Thanks very much. Are there questions of the applicant? Mr. Winterberg?
No, not with plans, no.
I have a question, and that is regarding the bocce court with the double-sided bench. So the bench, you said back-to-back, is that on the bench?
Yes.
Well, putting a bocce court under an oak tree is not a good idea. Oak trees are very dirty. I love them, I've got several. But anyway, I'm just wondering if is that, written in stone there?
Okay.
That actually, when we got the report back from Mark, we decided that maybe the bocce ball court would have to go. So we've decided that, because the health of the tree is more important than having a bocce ball court, and quite frankly, they're able to go across the street to the bocce ball court if they really want to. So we're going to actually just make that a passive seated area, probably with an internally enclosed fountain. Enclosed meaning there aren't water lines running to it that would harm the tree. It would be an internal fountain. So we've moved on from the bocce ball court.
Love
We
the
said,
idea,
okay,
but-
not the end of the world. That's right.
Thank you.
Madam?
When you were before us, you talked about the demolition of the farmhouse. I know that's not on this plan, but are those plans still in place? The old Gibb house?
The farmhouse, I think, is being reviewed next week at council level, and I'm not sure of the owner's position at this point with it. I know it was a question last week.
Thank you.
Madam, anything else?
I'm done.
I just have one question. You mentioned Fish and Game had approved the project. Has Fish and Game, in point of fact, seen and approved this plan, or just the previous overall general landscaping plan?
They've approved a specific plan for the creek area only. They didn't deal with the rest of the site.
And that's to what I'm referring. So, has Fish and Game reviewed and approved this plan as it relates to the creek?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. If there aren't any questions, I think we can summarize our recommendations for the council, yes? Who'd care to begin?
I guess I can start. First off, I want to say, great job. I remember the last one, and I like this. I'm always a person who loves to see more trees on projects, so I want to start off by saying that. Color scheme, yep, love it. Driveway, great improvement. Parking, fantastic. Fountains are good. Trees are great. I had the same concern about bocce ball courts, the harm to the tree, and they're a mess to keep clean. But you guys are taking care of that. Walls. The front wall, I'm a little concerned about that height, and I actually had written in my notes that I wanted to see an elevation view, and you guys preempted me on that. Still a little concerned about it. I'm not totally against it, but I'm concerned about that mass. It's a pretty big space that's going to be blocked off with that wall, and I'd maybe like to see it broken up more somehow. So I'm a little ambivalent about that. The lawns, I guess I'm not too concerned about that. I like to see less lawns because they're not very green friendly, not environmental, since we have to water them so much, but that's okay. One concern I do have is about the rear fences. I liked the staff idea of raising them 6 to 12 inches and planting below them. My specific background is actually in disaster psychology, and I know as soon as things start going south, the last thing people are doing is planning on moving walls. So even if a policy was put in place, I would be skeptical about it actually being followed through. So that'd be my one recommendation there. Other than that, I think it looks good.
Should I just continue down the line here?
Okay.
All right. I pretty much have the same comments. I really like the new colors and materials across the board. The plant palette is nice. It was nice last time. It's even nicer this time, at least from what I can read on these reduced plans. And I like the use of the raised deck underneath the oak trees, and also the use of gravel and rock and other permeable materials. Great. I think that's great. With the creekside fencing, I tend to agree. I think it's going to be difficult to implement a plan in terms of removing it and when to remove it. You also have the issue of during a storm event, you might have a bank full channel, so it's running full, but it's not overflowing, and then upstream or downstream, there's a plug. Something happens, and then you have more of a flash flood situation they can't plan for. And no removable wall is going to really help that situation. And then the bocce court is a non-issue anymore. The lawn under the oaks, until Mr. Smith presented a good case, I tend to not argue with UC Davis research, but it's always been my impression that it's generally accepted that lawns under oaks aren't good, and there's a number of plant lists for planting under oaks, and lawn's never one of them. So I'm recently split on the issue now, thanks to Mr. Smith's testament to the fact, but I would still like to see something from an arborist saying that, sure, put some oak lawn, or put some lawn along the edges of the oaks and everything should be okay. For the walls, in theory and in elevation, I think they look fine. I think they'll look nice. I'm still, I always push for more permeability along our street frontages, more, I don't mean in terms of drainage, I mean in terms of sight and just kind of the general feel. And so I understand the need for noise attenuation, although I don't know if 8-foot walls are going to help a lot with, when the highway is much higher than that. And, but I think I would be supportive of 8-foot walls as they're drawn up in the elevation along the units only. So I understand you need to attenuate the noise along those parts and add some privacy, but I'd certainly like to see a little bit more permeability, at least being able to see in and out along the rest of the frontage there. And if screening is needed, achieving that through the use of more planting or massings. I think that, yeah, that's it. Thanks.
My turn. You've done wonders with the plan. It's astonishing. And because we're up here to be critical, I have two points. And the first are the walls, and staff was concerned. I suggest when you present to the council that you can verify that the height of the wall will shut out noise. At this point, it's just sort of one man's opinion against another. You need proof. For my purposes, I'm a short person. Walls are intimidating. They don't shut out noise. They shut out views. And my fear is that will do that here. But it's up to the council. We need to prove that to them. I've forgotten what the other point is. I'll come back to it if it comes to me. Thanks. All right.
All right, I must say that I agree with Rob about the fencing along the creek. I think it's better to raise it up so that water can flow underneath it and mitigate it that way. I understood from listening to Mr. Smith that the walls on the Washington Street side were going to be sort of staggered and also appear to be different elevations. So I have personally no problem with that. I like the additional plantings and I do like the idea of the paving that allows for the water to be drained into the landscape. So I think that it's actually a great improvement, and that's all I would say.
Rita, did you remember what the next one was?
Yeah, I was going to say that when you present about the drip line and the trees and the lawn, you need proof. You need to cite your,
I will quite agree that by far most of the refinements to the plan are improvements, and you're to be commended for them. With that said, I'll touch briefly on a few of the things that have been perhaps more contentious. First, I will specifically say I don't object to the proposed street walls at all. I think they're far enough back, and the way they're modified, I don't find that objectionable at all. Regarding the heritage oak trees, we're, as you're keenly aware, very sensitive about those. Any work, whether it be planting or otherwise, under the heritage oaks, the project arborist needs to sign off on. He said, one, do some tree wells, and the record in front of us, he's silent on any turf encroaching into the drip line. If he, as a certified arborist, gives an affirmation that a small encroachment, I would be more amenable to that. But right now, we don't have anything in front of us from the project arborist who's been guiding and watching these trees from the beginning, and I think that's a crucial thing. You've already agreed to delete the bocce ball court. That's great, complying with his recommendation. So the last thing I'm going to touch on is I'm adamantly opposed to the privacy fences along the creek. The bulk of this conversation has been focused on that those are a potential impediment to flood hazard. That's really just about one of four metrics why there aren't supposed to be encroachments into the creek setback. I'm not convinced that every alternative has been explored to provide privacy for the guests. I quite get people in two adjoining rooms would like to sit out on their deck and have some privacy, but I think there are other ways to do it, specifically organically, whether that's planting very large plants so that immediately you have screening. I would be supportive of something that was for a defined period of time. For example, if you planted a medium on which vines could grow, that could be removed ultimately, or I should say a temporary fence, or a condition of approval, so that could be removed while the shrubbery grows. But again, I want to repeat, the creek setback is a really hard thing, shall not intrude, and it's more than just flooding, it's preserving the entire riparian corridor. With that said, I will repeat, I think virtually everything else is certainly an improvement, and you're to be commended on it. That's all I have to say. Sandra, you have everything you need?
I do, thank you.
I think we're done. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Any?
I wanted to find out if everybody got this invitation to the ribbon cutting for the...
I did.
was an RSVP required?
I think they did ask for an RSVP, so it's a week. Oh, no, it's this Thursday. This Thursday, 3:30. Anyway, I called them and said I was coming.
Nice. Any other board reports? I got nothing.
I got nothing.
Good night. Sandra, staff reports. Any?
Yes.
Director
He
Tiernan.
wants to raise.
All right. You want to lift it up or demolish it to the ground?
What I'm going to briefly talk about is going to be coming our way eventually. It's called the WELO, Water Efficiency Landscape Ordinance. There is a new state law that requires everyone to adopt by January 1st. It's AB 1881. A water efficiency landscape ordinance that complies with a state guideline, or by default, you have to use the state's. Now, we have been in conversation with other jurisdictions in the valley, and we have decided our strategy will be to, for the time being, use the default and let that kick in and use the states, and then we would be adopting subsequent to that, along with, when we all do our green building ordinances, the more local WELO. There are jurisdictions that have come out ahead of the curve, and Santa Rosa has one that's more restrictive than the states in some ways, and Sonoma recently has produced a draft. Missing something somewhere out here. And let's see. There's other regions on the San Francisco Peninsula that are cooperatively getting together on their WELO. Contra Costa is just starting, the Water District region is just starting their work on the WELO and will be defaulting to the state. So we'll be probably in early spring, along with the green building ordinance, adopting a WELO. And what it means is essentially that there's a maximum applied water that you can, in a design, that you have to design to in a landscape plan. We'll be having, when applicable, landscape plans submitted that are designed to indicate that they are not exceeding the maximum allowed water use. And that's based on our local climate, evapotranspiration rate and rainfall, plant types, they categorize them low, medium, and high, and also the slope. And there's some other factors, and there's this formula. You punch in all the numbers, and that gives you the maximum. The North Bay, or excuse me, they call it I guess the North Bay model, which is Santa Rosa really, is 60%, which is of the net evapotranspiration, which is...
That's just a great word. Wow. Sorry, please continue.
Oh, my roommate wrote his master's thesis on evapotranspiration rate of animals. Yeah.
I got smarter just saying it.
And then it's 70% for the state model. Now, the thing is that in some cases, there may be a question of why we would be more restrictive, and we kind of have to justify that. I think a lot of this is going to come down to when we apply these. One of the things that in the state, they give some pretty big numbers for when it's applicable for a homeowner installed landscape that's equal to or greater than 5,000 square feet. There's certain restriction, and then for commercial and public agency projects, it's 2,500 square feet. And it gets into some restrictions on the amount of turf or use of turf. If there's a water feature like a fountain, that gets included and counted in the square footage. So,
what about replanting? Johnny homeowner is redoing his backyard. Would this WELO trigger a...
That's precisely why we have to be careful, because in the North Bay model, they are, when they're using a simple, whenever a building permit or design approval is required. Now, technically, anything in this town requires design review approval by the ZDRB or council. You can't plant a rhododendron in your yard without it technically being a change in the landscape and an improvement. They call it an improvement. So it's too all-encompassing, and we have to really set up to when it makes sense. Sonoma, their guidelines are a little more in between the two extremes, and they have set out some square footage requirements for, and I don't need to get into those, but they're lesser square footage requirements than the state, but not so everything encompassing as the North Bay. So given our local situation of typically smaller lots, and I think we would be more interested in doing this when someone's completely rehabilitating their entire yard. And it's going to mean, it's not just a matter of them submitting a more complete plan, and the plants they use have to be kind of off of an approved list. There are certain invasive species that are, there's Cal Invasive Species Council or something like that, that lists species that are banned in California, or under the North Bay model would be, and pistache trees are one of them. So they're all over town, and we love them, and we plant them left and right, and so we've got to be a little careful of how we just start adopting these things, and particularly in a more restrictive way. Actually, I was surprised to see on that list, there's a lot of plants that are Mediterranean adapted, but I guess are considered invasive, and to various extents. Some are considered high, and others are, you see them recommended for Mediterranean landscapes. So when we get into that level of detail, we'll certainly be adapting it to our local situation here. But going on, there's things that are going to, when you put in a landscape system now, only certain amount of it can be overhead. They're looking for drip systems, meaning you're throwing water, like the typical sprinkler system, and when you do have those systems, you now have to have the sprinkler head moved in 2 feet from any hard surface. So you can't have the sprinkler head right at the corner where the driveway meets the sidewalk. And the idea there is that they typically go out of adjustment, and you're watering the sidewalk and the driveway. And so what it's going to mean is moving it in 2 feet, and you can have a pervious apron of blocks or some other material that you just can't be next to a pervious surface. So just little things like that are going to be changes in how, and I don't know the speed at which the industry is going to adapt to or have the knowledge of the new requirements, that we're going to have people coming in here designing landscapes, and it's going to be news to them that I got to do what, and over time they'll all catch on, but initially it's going to be a big change. Anyway, applicability will be probably one of the biggest ones for us, so when we are going to apply it. We've talked about at staff level, the people that maintain the commercial landscapes, Tom McCormick, and in front of Pac Blues, for instance, seasonally they change the flowers, and I don't want to have that trigger a whole, rehabilitation thing where now they got to go in and redo everything. It's just maintenance and upkeep, and so those are, we got to look at our local situation and be smart and adapt it.
One related question, Bob. I would wonder if this wouldn't be a good opportunity to add some teeth to the section in the municipal code that says it's illegal to waste water, but there's no penalty or enforcement. It just says you shan't waste water.
Yeah, I think there's a
But there are no teeth behind it.
Fundamental prohibition against that in here. Of course, a lot of that comes down to enforcing, and if someone's chronically doing that, then washing the sidewalk, every day, and wasting water, then, yeah, we could go after them as...
And I think you do see some of that where hoses are being used to clean parking lots, and, well, it's just wasteful to begin with, and it's prohibited. There's no teeth, except to say you shouldn't do that.
Yeah, and that's prohibited on actually not only wasting water, but the Water Quality Control Board.
Right.
Doesn't.
But for our local ordinance, it just says don't waste water, but there's no teeth. So I think that might be a place to include that.
It's even iffy if you can wash your car in your driveway, actually, according to the Water Quality Control Board.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's that's going to be, the purpose of me giving you this little report is to inform you that we will be defaulting to the state model and using that until we adopt it with the green building code. So, spring, probably.
So I do have a question, though. That's January 1, right? So as of January 1, who is going, I mean, is that decision you guys are making, is who's going to be the one deciding that? For example, we just approved a landscape plan that had fountains, it had multiple different plants, invasive plants, I mean, a host of potential issues that would come under that. Is that something you're going to filter out before it gets to us, or?
Well, as of the new year, they'll need to comply with the state model, and we're going to need to get some handouts together pretty quick, and, yeah, and they're going to have to produce a design that complies with that calculation sheet for evapotranspiration rate and plant type, and they have these, one of the, what's it called, the hydrozones, to where you've got to separate your landscape into low, medium, high water demand, and you can't mix a low against a high or have one located adjacent to it. They've got to be in a gradation. So starting in the new year,
Sounds like a lot more work for the landscapers.
yeah, it will be.
Will there also, Bob, be some thought then given to the reclamation of gray water and things like that? Will that be addressed or not?
Yes, reclaim water is part of this, and there's in certain cases, like fountains have to recirculate water, and they would, if they're using gray water systems, like, and really the only one that we have is coming with Knight subdivision. And I don't think we're using gray water otherwise or have any private systems in town. Of course, with the vineyards, that's a different deal. It goes out of town with our wastewater now.
No, but with the new community hall, we have that. Well, groundwater retrieval.
Yeah, the EPIC system.
I saw that the other day. It was very exciting.
Yeah, I took pictures of it before they covered it up. It's kind of a unique system. But that's really, it's more capturing rainwater than it is a gray water system where we're...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And then just, when are we going to get to that green building codes? And
Well, there's another, we're also working in cooperation with the other two Up Valley jurisdictions, and part of it, I think, the tack we're taking now is the state's coming out with a green building code, and there's some thought that instead of racing ahead and producing something that may ultimately not be in compliance with the state, to wait for the state to be released and then have a look at that and go from there. Have you heard any more from our group?
The state does have a green building code, it's just adoption is voluntary right now.
Yeah.
I mean, one could be adopted tomorrow
Right.
for the local jurisdiction, but
And that's the direction we're taking, using the state code while it's voluntary, and then moving to the mandatory timing in the future. Of course, these issues will probably come up more as we have greater discussion on the climate action plan and the things we'll implement to achieve reductions, and this is likely to be one of the areas that would be well suited for towns since it was built out, and we have a lot of structures built before 1980, so it's retrofitting as well as new structures.
And I understand, like, in the state code, they're lacking some means to calculate some of the, like, efficiencies of the measures that they are recommending. It's like now you know, in glazing in a house and the heat loss and all of that, they tell you how to calculate that, or there's programs, and they're not there yet with some of those programs.
Okay.
So any questions on Wello?
get.
Will we be
Kind of
given,
a big difference in the way we do things now, and it's going to be more, well, certainly methodical and systematic and tied into probably what's going to result in some real savings when it's applied. And that's the other thing is how over time we get everybody kind of moving in that direction and defining when, well, the commercial projects would be a little easier, but without making it onerous on the homeowner to set a low threshold and trigger it. So,
And we're not going to have to remove all the pistache trees in town, are we? Are they going to become heritage trees eventually?
no, it's not, we're not obligated to do that. That's what the North Bay, in their take on this, let's see. Invasive plants. The state law says strongly discouraged. The prior state law said avoidance encouraged, which is probably the same as strongly discouraged.
I'm sorry.
And then the North Bay said invasive plants as listed by Cal IPC, that organization, are prohibited. Just if it's on the list, it's prohibited. So they take a real stricter interpretation of everything, it seems like, and it's not always good. So we can maybe stay in the strongly discouraged for most, that the ones we don't like, and the star thistle and whatever, the nasty ones, and keep the ones we like.
Good idea.
Thanks, Bob.
You bet.
Well then, unanimous consent to adjourn?
Unanimous consent.
Good night to everybody.
Good night. Happy Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving.
And coming up tomorrow back home in Los Angeles, stingrays are threatening the oyster and crab harvest in the Chesapeake.